Welcome one, welcome all to DeFi Crypto and Airdrops. I am Mike, aka Veteran Crypto, and with me today is a lifelong friend of the family, Charles Nunu, aka Charlie Nunu. A quick background on Charlie. He is a global business strategist with over 35 years of experience in international agribusiness, logistics, and renewable energy markets. He's the co-founder of Elements Markets and now Anew Climate, and a driving force behind Houston's startup ecosystem through text change. Charles is known for his rare ability to diagnose business challenges in minutes and deliver practical, results-driven solutions, a mentor, investor, and judge in major business competitions. He brings a wealth of global insight to today's conversation. Charles, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here, Mike.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time, sir. So you've been a friend of my dad since before I was born. You guys went to college together back in the day, and I grew up hearing all kinds of crazy stories about you. And I know you have a ton of stories. I'd love to have you have it back again because I know we're not going to cover everything I'd like to cover today. But with that being said, I want to jump into it because I know that I really enjoy having people on that have very, I don't want to say different, but very varying views, points of views on, different topics. And I know that we've had discussions before where we didn't necessarily agree. And I find that refreshing. I really like talking to people, and not to say that we're going to disagree today. I just don't like echo chambers. So today we're going to be talking about, we talked briefly the other day, and that's what kind of led me to ask you to come on the show. But I want to talk about something that you brought up, which is the global markets and just kind of the bubble that you feel we're in, and potentially, some of the pitfalls or some of the things that you see coming down the pipe. So let's just go ahead and kick it off. And if you could, tell me a little bit about what you're seeing right now in the global markets, both the macro, micro, traditional, DeFi, whatever.
Okay, that's a big order for so let's start with the fundamental problem, which I don't think anybody wants to talk about, which is the continual loss of the U.S. dollar as a sovereign currency for most of the rest of the world. The dollar used to do close to 70% of all world transactions. Today we're down into the lower 60s, and it seems to be dropping. Debt is harder now to sort of fund because people don't want to take U.S. debt. So we're running into this crux of a situation where the uncertainty of the U.S. economic and political strategy is we're in a situation where the US's word is not worth very much. If you think about it, if I made an agreement with you, Mike, and then I changed my mind after we agreed to all the papers and wanted to renegotiate it, it starts to break down the series of trusts that exists not just with the politics or the transaction, but for future transactions, corporations, banks, insurance companies, schools, politics. It goes down the road. So we've broken some of the fundamental trust and confidence issues, which used to be expressed as the full faith of the United States government, right? That used to be and we could screw up because people knew that we would screw up, but they knew we would try to make it right when we screwed up.
Gotcha.
And that's been true for most of our history. And so, whether it's the Marshall Plan and post World War II, or whether it's other stuff, we try to do things to change the direction in what would be a reasonably solid moral compass, as opposed to being transactionally enriching ourselves, because we have this commitment to being the beacon for the rest of the world in many, many ways. So today, that seems to be on the side. Now, whether or not that's going to last is a whole other thing, but I can reasonably state that the the tariffs alone have already impacted, and it's not just the Swiss with 39% tariff on the Swiss, which have 7 million people. I mean, they at least have a sense of humor. They put out a swatch that said 39, so people can go buy it. But we're in uncertain territories because we have changing geopolitical fronts. We're not willing to recognize how much the Chinese have done since the first transactions I did with them in the early 1980s, when they were coming out of post Mao's culture wars, famines, and other things. And so we still are living in the sort of a post 1945, 1960s, where the United States was sort of the beacon and the strong economic power and sort of driving these kinds of changes around the world. That seems to be, at least for the moment, gone.
Gotcha.
There are countries that trust the Chinese and that trust the United States today. That
What are some of the indicators that you're looking at
Well,
to come to
I
that
think the first is
conclusion?
just UN behavior, in terms of votes with the United States, but it's also in terms of the way people have told the Canadians have told the Americans to stuff it, the Mexicans have told the United States to stuff it on their tariffs. The Chinese are not at the table. We made from an agricultural point of view, we the Trump administration tried to screw the Chinese in the first administration, and the Chinese said, "We're not going to do that again."
Mm,
So we have lost the entire soybean sort of corn markets for most of China. They've been transferred mostly to Argentina and Brazil for
okay.
soy. But at the same time, the Chinese have also been developing farms in Africa, and more people are not using the United States except as a very, very last resort. Now we
Mm,
haven't seen it yet in most cases, but you just saw that they're trying to put together a USDA program for 20 or 30 billion dollars to support the farmer. But we also have just domestic changes, right? We have lower sugar consumption, so the beet farmers are suffering because they're
mm,
not making as much sugar, right? They're getting replaced by Wegovy or other pharmaceuticals for people to lose weight. So we
mm.
have a whole series of institutional changes which are not that the average Jane or Joe on the street is not seeing yet, because it takes 6 to 9 months for it to work through the system. Very few people, and I say this with a certain amount of shame, know that the United States Navy is a fairly large operation, and the Navy has requirements for dry dock repairs, as most navies do, and we can't hire enough welders in this country who have clearances to go do that. And for the
Mm,
last 15 or 20 years, we've gotten them from NATO. They'd come over on 3-month periods. They're high skilled, security cleared workers. They come in, do the repairs on these ships, and they go back. They can't get visas anymore.
mm.
We are still looking for welders to fix everything on the East Coast in our Navy ports. So it isn't just the issues around government work. It isn't just the fact that we're missing 100,000 manufacturing jobs that haven't been filled, or 100,000 truck drivers that we needed to move stuff around. Now
Mm.
everything is slowing down, and I don't know how long that takes before we actually feel it. And I think
Gotcha.
part of that issue around the economic uncertainty is why people are jumping into the gazillion different Bitcoin cryptocurrencies, even though they're all weakening today over the last week or so, or 10 days. But
Oh, absolutely.
we're getting this rush up as people look for safe havens and some protection, um, with uncertainty. And the banks have been usually the bulwark after the post 2008 collapse of stability, but they're also look for more speculative investments. And so we have not just the AI bubble, or the energy bubble,
Mm.
or the crypto bubble, or the real estate issues that are being torpedoed
It's just the bubble.
by insurance costs, or just actual costs, or the
Mm,
investors who are buying up real estate and making it more expensive for even renters to get a fair
mm.
share. And
Absolutely.
everybody continues to forget that the United States still has half the country, which makes $40,000 a year or less. And the main driver for the U.S.
And
actually,
credit card debt at all-time highs.
we have credit card debt at all-time highs. We have auto defaults or delays
Mm,
or late payments at all-time highs now in the auto payment side. and people don't actually understand. I don't know that anybody knows what shoe is going to drop to precipitate this, but you saw it with First Brands, the first bankruptcy that's kind of come up of some size uh,
Mhm.
last week, and another one that also does auto financing stuff. We're just in one of those periods of time where we don't know where we have we are resetting the infrastructure issues. We are making threats we can't execute on, and at
Mhm.
some point, the idea that the United States can turn itself into a manufacturing empire in 3 or 4 years is just delusional.
Mhm.
It's not, because even if you could do it, it just takes 3 or 4 years to build anything, presuming you don't have any resistors on on environmental or permitting or whatever it happens to be. It just, there's a physical time to do engineering, logistics, layouts, planning. It's like a military operation.
Well, of course, and logistically, I mean, I mean, you're talking about the physical infrastructure. I mean, not
Yeah,
to not to mention the the raw materials, for like
and
microchips
exactly,
and rare earth, elements, things like
for
that.
getting proper steel or
Mhm.
equipment that has now been disrupted, and it has to be done locally, even though many of the Europeans, like Aramet, have steel production in the United States. Um, but we've pissed enough people off that the Canadians are now developing aggressively their port system, so they don't
Mhm.
have to come to the United States for surface transports.
Mhm.
You're seeing that throughout South America, with the Chinese doing infrastructure port developments in Peru. The Mexicans are likewise expanding because the United States is no longer a reliable counterpart without somebody throwing a spanner in the works. So
Well,
that
and,
is
and, and you have, and you're speaking from
constant.
decades of experience in international shipping. I mean, that's where the market share of your experience is, isn't it?
Well, the other issues, yeah, because they're picking on the Chinese for reasons. So there's a story here, which I'll tell you. When our first company went broke with, when that had been originally set up with Mark Rich. In the late 90s, we ended up having a situation which probably was pre .com. But we had the major trading companies found themselves in a situation where all of a sudden we ended up having enormous amounts of chaos. And the top of our business plan for as a grain merchant, and I say this as an open and closed parentheses, the most famous grain merchant that everybody knows that nobody talks about is William Shakespeare. Some of his plays about famines are because his dad was a grain merchant,
Mm.
a wool farmer, a wool broker. He was a grain merchant thrown in jail for hoarding some barley, I think 80 bushels or some damn thing. Anyway,
Yeah, barley
um,
hoarders.
well, there were issues. Tariffs were a big problem. We all
Yeah.
know that's why they got rid of the corn laws. Anyway, the point being is that we ended up in a situation where the four tigers in Asia were in free fall. The Russians had defaulted on their debt. The Argentines were in the middle of a mess. And anyway, they sequestered our VAT, the value added tax, which is export, which we needed because we were exporting out of Argentina into Europe. We had a series, the freight markets were starting to go into free fall, and the banks were panicking because of the freight markets. So people were pulling in credit lines very, very quickly. So everybody thinks that it's one thing that precipitates a crisis. It's never one thing that precipitates a
Mhm.
crisis. It's one thing that starts the crisis, and there are other things that are weak along the line that start to show up
And
and
it's a cascade effect.
they start to cascade through the
Yeah.
banks, because either the banks get panicky or the insurance companies get panicky or the governments get panicky, and something
Mhm.
starts to pull stuff in.
Well, we saw it on Friday in the crypto markets. There was $20 billion of liquidations, and it
Well, I didn't know.
was
I had no idea, but I saw the markets were down, but I
yeah,
had no idea there was that much liquidation.
largest liquidation in crypto history. I mean,
And I think what's happening, and then we saw it today, I think in the stock market in part, I think what's happening is people have started to realize there is a bubble that's been taking place because of all the,
Mhm.
we saw it in 2000 when I came back from Switzerland back to America, and we saw the dot-com world spending, everything. If you had a dot-com behind you, people were throwing money at you, but it didn't take
let,
very long for the whole thing to
let
fall.
me let me actually back up a little bit. I want to ask you this question because we're kind of on the topic already. So I know that you're an older gentleman, much like I am, So you've been around for the dot-com crash, the 2008 financial crisis, COVID, just all of these different, crises, over the years. What similarities are you seeing between those instances and what you're seeing right now?
Easy money. That is, the
Mhm,
cash liquidity is very, very high. You have a
mhm,
lot of people with a lot of ammo that they've made. And maybe I should step back. In 2008, I was convinced, and probably wrongly so, that we did the right thing by saving the world from going into an economic collapse for the Depression. Because I've seen countries when they're on their backs, and it's not a very pretty sight.
mhm,
Um, Fast forward, I would say we should have let the whole bloody country fail. Venture
mhm.
bank, I mean, I don't care if it wasn't just Lehman Brothers, Goldman, the whole crowd should have gone to the wall.
Yes, I agree.
Um, they and it would have caused enormous amounts of stress within the U.S. systems and the European systems and world systems in general. But what's happened is because of the bailouts, people
So
have never
sometimes you got
taken
to cut off the diseased limb,
well,
to
and
save
and
to save the
they
patient.
were trying, and I think they were trying from a moral point of view, trying to keep the average Jane and Joe from being hungry and unemployed on the street because the cascade
Yeah.
effect would have been 20 or 30% unemployment for a prolonged period of time. And the infrastructure just couldn't handle it. And so at the time, I get it because 43 plus Obama were thinking we can't let the whole place fall apart. Today, if we have a crisis, the United States won't be able to mend it together because no one trusts the United States for holding together the financial institutions anymore. But to your point, it was the liquidity issues, it was the indebtedness issues, it was delayed payments, it was the issues, it was stressed not just in the real estate market, but and collateralized debt obligations, but it was a whole series of things, right? That you had insurance players, you had all these players in the markets, and it just basically escalated to the point where it finally became just too much and it popped.
Mm.
And we all want to blame the housing crisis as being part of it, but that was probably the tail end of it. It was already in process. The housing market was just one more thing. It was the straw that broke the camel's back, but it wasn't the reason, it wasn't the only reason why the systems were over leveraged.
Mm.
And what did we do? As soon as we did it, we started putting out easy money and started doing the same thing. And so in the arc of basically 15 years, 16 years, we've done exactly the same thing. We have easy cash. It's we have. I don't see the difference now, except that the size is so much greater in the AI speculative markets than than it was even in the dot com world.
Mm.
Population densities have increased, demand on needs have increased. We now have extraordinary expenses in the medical world, pharmaceutical world. I mean, there isn't a sector which doesn't have extraordinary um, economical returns. And to the second point of that, which is we've also become specialists. So the CEOs of today are rewarded on their ability to massage their balance sheets to look like they're making money at any cost. And you might not remember what happened here with Centerpoint Energy, but they paid this guy, I don't know, an exorbitant amount of salaries, but he never staged anything for a proper disaster. We ended up having all kinds of chaos here during the
Mhm.
last freeze and stuff. And now he's spending $100 million to try and make it right. They should have fired the son of a bitch,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But but what happens is that everybody finds an excuse, and I can give you examples with everybody from a Green Plains renewables to normal corporate America. They have a checklist. They go down their checklist. That's how they get bonuses. That's how they get their premiums. It doesn't matter if they lay out the last 10%. You're ex-military. We don't leave people behind normally, but in the corporate world today, it's easy to leave people behind and not think about it. And there are consequences.
Yeah.
It isn't just a
No,
fiduciary.
absolutely.
It isn't a fiduciary breach of what your customers, stakeholders, employees need to do. It is part of that breakdown in trust. So you have a situation in which we didn't have in 2000, which is the breakdown in trust in corporate America,
Mhm.
insurance companies, government. You have all this stuff happening, right? And so they're jumping to whatever they can: gold, cryptos.
Well, you see it. Gold is at like on the hour is printing new all-time highs. Silver is at like $54 an ounce. So
Yep.
it's at all-time highs. Crypto's hurting right now, but Bitcoin is still, well up.
It's
You know,
I don't know, 110, something like that, 114. I don't remember.
it right now it is sitting at. Let me pull that up real quick. 108. It's been dipping today. But you got the S&P 500. It's at record highs. You got just pretty much everything is at record highs. I mean, to me, everything just looks overheated.
It is
I mean,
overheated. It is absolutely, and it doesn't take very much to do it. People forget because they don't have long memories these days. We went through this, and they don't have well because everybody has the memory of a goldfish.
that's
Um,
I say that often.
but it's true, and so we went through this in 1980. I want to say 1981 because I was the first time I made money in the gold market by shorting gold. We had just come off the 2 or 3 year hiatus of the Hunt brothers, who were buying all the silver and trying to corner the silver market,
Mhm.
and they ran up silver and gold to just went like this, right?
Yeah,
But like all of these things, everybody panics to run into it. But at some point, there's going to be a reset. Now,
yeah,
I have no idea if it's 4,500 or 5,000, but at some point, gold runs out of steam, and it's going to be an excellent short because and to some degree, maybe that's what's happened with crypto. They've jumped into it, and people are saying, "Well, hey, I don't want to take the chance. Let me go get my cash out," because we definitely are going to need. People forget that even if you're in crypto or you're in gold. Sorry about the
uh,
dogs.
keep going. It's all
Doorbell, doorbell. Just a second. Anyway, but at some point there's this shift because people realize that they need to go pay the rent, or they need to go buy groceries, or they have to pay the phone bill or the internet system, or they have to give money to the kids, or they have to whatever. They have to have cash.
yeah.
And the question I have is, and maybe you know this better, is who actually is holding cash in the middle class or in most of America? I would
Not
say that
many.
Americans don't have a lot of savings.
No, if you look at the indicators, you look at record, credit card debt, you look at repos, you look at, all these different things. I mean, they're indicators that people don't have cash on hand. Rent, the price, the cost of living, groceries. I
Yeah,
mean, they're up double, triple. It's gas, the basics that people need to survive. Everything's up. Wages aren't up. The cost
right.
of living is
Exactly.
way up, but the wages aren't up. So people that were getting by before paycheck to paycheck are underwater. The people that were smart and living well within their means, they're having to tighten their belt a bit. There's definitely something brewing, and I think a lot of people aren't paying attention.
And you can see it in gasoline prices because gasoline prices usually go up when the economy is good. They
Hmm.
usually go down when the economy is not good because consumption is going down. Now, yes, we do have electrical vehicles taking some of it off, but it's a lot like what happened during COVID. Everybody was all pissed off about one thing or the other about the oil companies. Well, the oil companies didn't have anybody buying their bloody refined goods. I mean, refineries weren't making margins because people weren't driving around; they were at home. So there are consequences that change, and then they started going to biodiesel and all this stuff. So we have all these changes that are taking place that people can't really absorb in an afternoon cup of tea. And it takes, as I said, it takes 6, 9 months, 12 months to go work through the system before people feel it at their kitchen table. And unfortunately, the reality is, until people feel it at their kitchen table, you don't see change, or you don't see people getting mad. And I think that is probably the next step, but I don't know that that happens before next year. I mean, I think there's still continued economic, I don't want to say consumer confidence, but there's still spending that's going to go on through the end of the year because we're in the middle of October. We're basically a month away from Thanksgiving, and then we're basically in the Christmas season. And so we'll find out if Christmas spending goes down. But we have already seen that the economic activity in the United States is starting to decline,
Hmm.
right? In
All right.
terms of
Well, let's shift a little bit into capital flows and debt. So you've worked extensively across Latin America, Europe, and the Middle East. How are global capital flows behaving right now? And do you think debt levels in emerging and developed markets are sustainable?
um, can't speak about the Middle East as such, but I see big holes, and I certainly see big holes in Europe because of the war in Ukraine. Um, the other thing is, I guess, to say this without being politically incorrect.
Speak
We
freely.
also we all, no, it's not that. I don't want to misstate it. The issue is we forget that where we are from where everybody else was.
Mm.
So just think about it from a military point of view. Post World War II, Europe is devastated. The United States isn't, right? Because most of the war didn't take place in the United
Oh yeah,
States.
and we had geared up for production.
Exactly. And we geared up, for
We had all
mechanization,
the
for
factories.
manufacturing, all this stuff, right? So now you've basically destroyed Europe. You rebuild Europe. So yes, they have nicer buildings. They're more modern. The Chinese came from basically disasters, famines, and all this stuff. So they have these enormous amounts, cities and infrastructure, bullet trains that travel 300 kilometers an hour from one point to the other. They did
Mm.
all these things that we never have done, right? We didn't
Yeah,
have to do because we still have them. And it
yeah.
takes so long to get stuff done anyway because our density of population is becoming more constrained. And we have differences in states.
Mm.
Louisiana, Georgia is different from a New York or California or even Minneapolis or Minnesota.
Mm.
So we have issues that we have to deal with that other people don't deal with. And part of this is in terms of capital flows is exactly what you were talking about. They may have more debt in some areas, but they're starting from a lower level of economic development to get some of this stuff done. Brazil
Mm.
has done very, very well agriculturally, technologically. They have superb computer skill sets. They have men, materials, and cash to go do these things. They've developed their open markets. It doesn't matter whether it's Bolsonaro or Lula, the country itself has these assets.
Mm.
Politics may frame it, shape it, make it red, blue, green, purple, piss people off, but it still has all this stuff that's going on that's really solid infrastructure demand based. The same in Peru, Chile. Um, Argentina is a mess. I lost my first fortune in Argentina, and I can tell you Argentina is still a mess. What did the United States do? They wanted to back the peso. They put in 20 billion
And that was recently.
peso, and then it collapsed the next day, which is
Yeah,
exactly what happens every time you do anything in Argentina. That's just
yeah,
okay. If anybody had actually understood Argentina, we could have told them that and saved 20 billion bucks. And they
yeah.
pissed off all the farmers in the United States,
Mm.
right? Because instead of helping them get their export markets back, they're
Yeah,
basically funding
subsidizing Argentina.
a major competitor.
Yeah.
So we have a bunch of people who are looking at the world in a very, very myopic way, which don't understand how easy it is to circumnavigate and circumvent anything from embargoes to whatever. Crypto gets a big jump because the Russians can sell oil to somebody and it gets paid in crypto, or the
Mm.
Iranians or the Chinese, right?
Mm.
The United States thinks we can, and some of the Europeans think we can push people around. Not so easy to do anymore. The world is no longer, unipolar. It's really got multiple polarization, and we have lots of demand flows which are moving now away from the United States, including
Yeah.
Mexico, which is still buying U.S. corn, but it is absolutely looking for South America development and elsewhere, right?
Yeah.
Because that's their nearest neighbor. So we're in new ground where it's very, very difficult to be bullying people in the world, and we're trying to still bully people in the world.
Well, historically, we were bullying people from a position of power. And, we're no longer in as strong of a position of power to be
Well, yeah,
trying to
because we
use
were
the
the
dollar
strongest,
to
and
push
we're
people
still,
around.
and let's not forget, we are still a very strong, the strongest economic. I mean, we're
Oh,
still,
absolutely.
even with $37 trillion in debt, we're still a fairly large economic powerhouse. However, the rest of the world is catching up. And
Mhm.
the Chinese have absolutely caught up from an industrial point of view. People don't realize that the robotization that's taking place in China makes the United States look like it's 1950s in some cases.
Yeah.
They have completely automated plants that would astonish most people here.
Yeah.
right? But you don't hear that here because and they don't, and the capacity they built is because they have a billion people roughly, right? They have one
Well,
circle.
they build entire cities that nobody lives in. I mean,
Well,
they,
and
almost
part of
almost
the extra
overnight.
capacity was, well, back to your issue about freight. So let's go back to the freight story that I didn't tell you.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
in 1998, the world's falling apart, and all the major grain companies. There's 5 companies that used to control 70% of the world's distribution in agriculture in my day. So it was Cargill, Continental, uh, Dreyfus, Bunge, and Andre. 2 of those, Conti and Andre disappeared. Well, Conti hasn't disappeared; it's still a 200-year-old company, and they're all 200-year-old companies. They've been around the block and they've seen stuff. Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
this is not industrial revolution stuff. We're talking, Napoleonic War stuff
Yeah, yeah.
around the world. But when the Chinese, when they had to give back the vessels they were trying to build for dry bulk cargo, there was nobody to take them because the grain markets were basically almost in a free fall, and so they had nobody to do this. So they paid the penalties. The shipbuilders took back the builds that were in process, and guess who stepped in? The Chinese,
Mhm.
and they scooped up everything because they could do it.
Yeah.
Didn't matter about the London shipbrokers. Didn't matter. Didn't all the Clarksons, all the majors in the world. Didn't make the Greeks. Forget it. The Chinese came in and sucked them all up. So a Cape-sized vessel, which at the time probably would have cost anywhere from up to $100,000 a day for chartering on a day basis, it's 100,000 tons, and anyway, it's a large dry bulk vessel, would go at something like $100,000 a day for rent, we'll call it, for steaming, dropped to about $10,000 a day. And it was there until about 2004 and 5. But what the Chinese did is become the majority ship owner in the world,
Mhm.
outplacing Greeks, everybody else, the Koreans, and everybody else, and the Japanese.
Mhm.
They own half the maritime fleet today.
Mhm.
But they didn't do it from a strategic position. They did it because it was an opportunity that presented itself in 1998, and it was their unemployment program. We can't do that.
Mhm.
And so to penalize them because they're moving, container freight, liquids, dry bulk is insane. People now don't want to come to the United States. Well, I don't know if that's true today, but it was true about a month ago or 6 weeks ago. They were dumping cargoes at sea because they didn't want to get caught into some problem getting the tariffs registered for a container cargo because of a pratique. So if one container had something that was supposed to have a strange tariff, it could tie up the ship for bloody 40 days
Mhm.
while they clear it out, right? Either discharge it, not discharge it, etc. So it didn't happen a lot, but it did happen. And so I don't think people understand why the supply chain is so tight now, because even though freight is relatively cheap, and the first, by the way, the first instance of a recession is when freight starts to drop. When
Mhm.
freight starts dropping to a destination, you can be pretty sure something's happening. The
And,
supply
and
demand, the
and what do you
demand
mean? And what do
may
you mean exactly by
may
drop?
somewhere, right?
What do you mean exactly by drop?
Well, if a rate was 30,000 a
Oh,
day
okay.
versus
You mean price?
$20,000 a day, you can be sure that's because there isn't enough demand to fulfill that ship's use
Okay.
capacity.
You mean price? I thought you meant maybe like drop
No,
cargo.
no, no,
Okay.
no.
All right. Well, speaking of supply chains, having built and operated supply chains around the world, how do you see inflation, supply shocks, and rising financing costs converging in a way that could trigger or accelerate a systemic collapse?
We had this in the 2002 or 2003 where people were making budgets, and I sit there and would talk to people, and Passenger Refining comes to mind because they needed to get something in their budget, and I told them, I said, you can't. You're making the budget based on today's prices to submit to your board for approval. By the time it goes through the chain, it's going to be 6 months to a year. You're going to be wrong by 10 to 15% on materials and cost of labor.
Hmm.
It's very difficult to put that into a budget presentation. So people don't do it. Then they end up doing basically adjustments saying, oh, well, we did this, and now we're going to go do this. I don't think people yet realize how expensive it's going to be.
So basically you feel like that they like they lack the ability, and I've seen this in my limited experience. Just the larger the organization, the slower it moves, the more red tape that they have,
Exactly.
and the less
Exactly.
agile they are.
Exactly. Exactly. And you have enormous corporations with enormous, firewalls and safety checks and hurdles you've got to make and gates you've got to make and approvals you've got to get. It
Mm.
takes forever to get an approval done, right? So who's going to go do it when you have so much uncertainty? Part of the problem is the uncertainty that's been created in the last 11 months, 9 months, has forced people to want to hold off because they don't know what's going to happen next. It used to be that you would have normal economic indicators, call it home buying to consumer price index to unemployment to whatever. Now, all you have to do is wait one day, and if Mr. Trump opens his mouth, the markets are up and down like a horror on payday.
Oh shit! One tweet.
I mean, it doesn't take very much to say, "Oh my God, we're going to screw the Chinese now," and the whole place falls apart again, right?
That's
Oh
what
no,
happened
we're
on
going to
Friday.
negotiate and do something, and the market's rallying back up again. So you've
Mm.
got these. You don't. You have the normal. You have the normal weather, wars, assassinations, floods, famines, other acts of God, government exchange, supply shifts, and stupidity. But now
Yeah.
you have the 30 or the 9-second soundbite.
Mm. Or the simple tweet. Like I said, Friday,
Whatever, right? It doesn't
he
make whatever the
tweeted
public
that
gets.
he was going to raise tariffs by 100% on the Chinese, and the crypto markets went to shit.
Exactly. Exactly. So you're in a situation where people should be far more conservative in their spending. They should be really, really serious about trying to save as much as they can because you don't know what shoe is going to drop next in a situation where there's so many things not just out of your control, but out of the business control mechanism ability to adjust, the political ability to adjust, the
That's
fact that we buy most of our plywood from Canada, Vietnam, and a few other places, so construction is going to have its own issues. The number of sawmills that are shutting down in the upper peninsula in Michigan, et cetera. I mean, we have lots of things which are starting to come. As I said, it takes time before they start to actually, so to speak,
coalesce into the perfect
so to
storm.
speak, right? Well, yeah, right. I
So,
mean,
well, you bring up a really good point. There's, we discussed that there's a lot of people out there struggling financially. That debt, credit card debt's all time high, repos, are rising. All of these different things are kind of converging. And you mentioned, people being able to save. Their value, their liquidity. Inflation. If you have money in the bank, I mean, over the past year, I think it's like 8 or 9%, inflation that we've realized. You know,
well, it's like an insurance premium. Everybody says, "Oh, yeah, but I'm only getting 3% of the bank or 2% of the bank or whatever it is." Yeah,
yeah,
but it's 2 or 3% today. At the end of the story, it sucks. Fully agree, right?
yeah.
But when nobody has any money and you can't go buy anything,
Mm.
it's worth 3 times what you think it is, right? When you need to go do something. Cash is always king when a crisis comes up.
So let's dive into
And
that
we had
because
this in 2008. There was a period at one point, and I don't know how publicized it was. There were congressional people who were actually thinking about going to withdraw money because they were convinced the whole system was going to lock up and they could not get cash.
well, I mean, let's. I know some people would bring up, say Venezuela, with hyperinflation that happened there.
Well, I
Cash.
don't think we get hyperinflation because we still have reasonable look, notwithstanding the kind of silliness that's going on in politics, we still have reasonable values, and we haven't valued most of the assets in the United States to current values.
Hmm.
What we have is a spending problem that we can't seem to control, and we have a tax problem because they've been told since before Obama, the Republicans have to pay more taxes, and the Democrats have to stop spending. There's
Yeah,
no, Simpson Bowles was pretty explicit about what you've got to go do to fix this,
yeah.
but no one wants to listen to it. Just
Mm.
like no one wants to cut military bases in their districts, right?
Mm.
So we have 700 military districts. The Chinese have been telling us for years, quit spending money on all those. You don't need them. This is post World War II. Why do you need 3 bases in Italy?
I think our
Well, two in
politicians,
Germany, and
unfortunately,
and
are
all.
are
I mean, we
addicted
have
to
more
spending.
military bases, and there is no reason to do this. And you're worried about cutting the military. Shut down a couple of the bases and retire them. You
Oh, I
want to
think
keep
a lot. I
Japan?
think a
Keep
lot of
Japan. But
people in
strategically
Washington
speaking, there
are,
are issues
you know,
that you can do that make economic sense that would reduce the defense spending at least, or change it. Right?
well, I think in Washington, it seems like there's like this legacy mentality that anytime that the U.S. is in, wants to grow, as far as financially or GDP or whatever, it's like they go back to World War II and saw what World War II did for America, with our infrastructure and things like that, the factories and the wealth that we were able to generate being the reserve currency, and that somehow going to war is going to stimulate the economy is what it feels like from my time in the military and paying very close attention to that. What I mean,
Sure.
what's your
But I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I look there. We can't seem to get our priorities. The difficulty is that America doesn't realize, because we're spoiled to some degree, and we have so many independent voices, and everybody's opinion counts. We can't do the big projects that a China can do.
Mm,
We just can't.
mm.
We were absent in Africa, and China cleaned up. They're
Oh,
bitching
yeah.
about rare earths, but they were there when nobody else was there, right? From
Well,
Algeria to Angola.
Afghanistan, when we pulled out of Afghanistan, who was the first people there talking to the
Bingo,
Taliban?
exactly. And so, when you think about this, it's partially because we don't have the. I'm going to say this at the risk of being an asshole, but we don't have the actual intelligence and technocrats in the government. We tend to have people who are pretty short-sighted, and they don't
Yeah.
think about things in 10, 20 years, and they don't think about the changing demographics of the United States. We're 335 million people. Well, we're really designed for a government of around 200 million people, and we've never been able to adjust the damn thing since
Mm.
since we've started growing so fast. And with immigration, we're all pissed off at immigrants, but at the end of the story, if we hadn't had the immigrants during COVID, unlike Europe, which was crashing and burning, we did pretty damn well because people could still get stuff done.
Mm.
So there's all these trade-offs that we keep on thinking that there's a single bullet theory that we're going to go fix this, and it isn't. There's a complex system issue, and we've lost the sense of systems engineering. I can't imagine a special ops person not knowing with his team how to get in and how to get out and how to pick up bodies when they had to.
Yeah.
They cover everything 360.
Yeah.
Yes, shit happens and it's out of your
Oh,
control, but you've already made a plan to try and figure out how to fix it, get in there and get back out if necessary.
oh,
And
yeah. No,
everybody knows,
you
and
have a
everybody
bunch of
knows,
different
and
plans. You
everybody
have
knows the
a
rules
primary,
and
secondary, tertiary. You got all kinds of different plans.
that's right. And you've got plan A through Z because shit happens every single day,
Yeah,
right?
because it never goes to plan.
Which is why you're brought up, improvise, adapt, overcome, because you just don't know, you may have good intel and then there's something that you just didn't expect to happen, right? So
Yeah.
so there is a perspective in the military that we've lost in government. There's some perspective in the military about taking care of people, which we've lost in the government. And there's an integrity issue that we have lost that was in the military that used to be the basis of how the United States operated in terms of its word. Whether it was a CIA direct, do you really think the rest of the Four Eyes are sharing intelligence with the United States today? When some son of a bitch can go talk to Putin or pick up the phone and go tell somebody on Signal? I mean, really? You've got rank amateurs.
Mhm.
I mean, in no place in the world does the vice president and the president of the United States fly on the same plane. And you pull in 50 general or 100 generals into one simple building. Is that insane or what? You don't even do that in a bloody military command center.
No. Well, they have contingencies upon contingencies in
But
our
that's my point.
government.
But the point is,
So you're not supposed to have certain people in
but
the same
that
place
but
at the
that
same time.
discipline that's my point. That discipline, which was the basic substructure, infrastructure, structure for how things operated, has been thrown out, and now it's a wild west, and that's why there's a loss of confidence, and why the economic situation is not clear, and why people should be concerned because we don't know what shoe drops next, frankly.
That's true.
I mean,
It's true.
it could be a war. It could be the Ukraine. It could be the Palestine, and it could be Venezuela. It could be, who the hell knows? Drug lords. We have no earthly idea.
Well, I have my next question, but I think we kind of answered it. I'll ask it, and just let me know if you have anything that you want to add. So you've observed firsthand how institutions react in times of panic. Do you think that today's institutional investors and governments are better prepared for a global market correction or more exposed?
No, I think they're going to sink like a ton of lead
Mm-hmm.
in the ocean.
All right.
They all are chasing the same things, and nobody is thinking about the downside.
Yeah, no, I would tend to agree. Well, then let's go to the next question. How would you compare the speculative behavior we see today across equities, bonds, real estate, even green energy and ESG to past mania cycles that you've lived through?
So Michelle Freeborg, God bless him, who was the owner of Continental Grain Company, um, when I saw him probably last before I left Conti, came to Rome, and we were having a conversation, and he wanted to talk, and he was hell bent on this conversation about the quality of money. This is a person who could cut a check for some countries out of his back pocket without thinking about it too hard. And he was right, because there is an issue. God bless him. That was right, that we don't think about the quality of money, and we think about the velocity of money and how quickly you can return it and how you can put it out and you can do all this stuff. But we don't think about what the actual consequences are for the stakeholders, for the customer, for the suppliers. We don't think about all this chain that goes through to it, and whether or not there's a fair margin in there or not. There's nothing wrong with greed. God knows it's fear and greed which moves markets, but we've become exuberant in the greed side for paybacks or for everything else, and we've done it without the integrity. And I'm not going to say the moral compass, because the moral compass can be a little bit flexible, but we just as how should I say this? Just as public opinion has moved to the X's and to social media, and my voice is the most important in the room, we think that the actual transaction is a fucky or fucker, right? I'm going to be the fucker or fucky, right? And that, in fact, doesn't do anything to actually. Well, they wouldn't say it that, but that's kind of what it is, right? I mean, but the reality is, when you put money into play, there are consequences around not just employees but their customers. Are you going to be a Nikola, that rips off the entire company and gets a pass from Mr. Trump after stealing $150 million and crashing a company? The egregious greed is destroying what I would call the morality or the human kindness that used to exist in Midwest America, so to speak, right? People used to do a fair deal. If I put a farmer out of business and I can't get him back next year, I lose grain that goes through my elevator or an export market or whatever. My job is to keep him in business. Yes, shit happens every single day. Weather, rain, army birth of worms. It doesn't make any difference. But you don't want to say, oh, now you owe me, I'm taking over your land.
Yeah.
We don't ever think about the consequences of trying to keep the chain intact so that people can actually operate. And everybody thinks it's linear and doesn't have all these other issues that happen all the time, a la center point energy, right? Or pick anything.
All right.
I mean, the guy who got shot from United Healthcare. Well, because you can't get a fair deal from your health provider.
Mm.
I mean, you've got to go through so many. It's like trying to get veterans benefits. There was a time when you used to go make your application and you were turned down first. You had to get turned down first before you could get your second okay or third meeting. Right. And so that behavior is what's poisoning a lot of the way people expect, which was the good old fashioned Midwest honorable transaction. Let's see if we can fix this. Now we just go to court.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, things used to be, instead of contracts, you just, a lot of stuff was a handshake deal. It's like nowadays, even with the contract, you can't trust people half the
Well,
time.
that's it. They renegotiate the contract as soon as you do it. So as that integrity breaks down, you have that whole system starts to break down in terms of what the quality is, and it's just a cash deal.
Mm.
And so, you
Well,
don't think about the moral consequences or the spiritual consequences or whatever else happens. Look, you're ex-military. There are shitty things that you have to go do.
oh
That's
yeah.
just part of the job. But
Mhm.
but the average Jane and Joe, they don't have to make those kinds of extreme decisions or those extreme actions, but they make them that big, and they don't think about it after they've done it. And so there are real consequences from us, and particularly if you claim to be a Christian or a Jew or a Muslim or whatever. If you actually have a spiritual context, Buddhist, I don't
Mhm.
care if you think your soul gets stuck on the roof after a rainy day and you can't get it down to hurricane, whatever it
Yeah,
is, whatever that compass is, requires
yeah.
you to behave within that context with your fellow human beings. We don't do that anymore.
Mhm. Oh yeah. No, people have gotten very short-sighted for sure. So this question, not sure exactly, kind of what road it might lead down, but what role do you think central banks have played in inflating the current bubble? And more importantly, what would an orderly exit look like if it's even possible?
An orderly exit for
For basically just well, here I'll read it again. The What role do you think central banks have played in inflating the current bubble, globally that we've been talking about?
No, look, the central bank was there because there needs to be some outside impartial member to manage what you know, the Fed rates to make sure that it stays within some reasonable band. The Swiss do this very, very well. The
Hmm.
United States used to do it extremely well, but now it's become a political issue. And so you don't have people agreeing on what inflation is anymore, or what debt looks like anymore, or how much debt's going to get paid. No one has yet told me how you're going to pay down 37 or 30, whatever the $1 trillion of debt the
Yeah,
United
yeah.
States has. You can only do it, back to what Simpson Bowles said, you either increase taxes,
Mhm.
you cut
Or
spending,
cut spending. Yeah.
right?
So,
If you just did one of those, you'd already make a big plus in terms of the value of the dollar, and you'd reset a lot of people's expectations about how things are done. But it's become a political football.
all right. Well, let's move to global trade. So you've traded grain, you've managed energy portfolios, and worked across currencies. How vulnerable is the real economy to a financial bubble bursting, particularly in dollar pegged or import reliant countries?
It's look, trade usually goes when we've had bankruptcies in the past. It typically happens the way Enron did. So, and I'm only moving to Enron as opposed to the grain trade because it'd be too esoteric for a conversation. But normally, the five majors and about 10 of the middle-sized companies, we all know each other, we all know how we behave, and we all know everybody's balance sheets.
Mm.
All right. Whether it's a country office, whether it doesn't make any difference, right? I mean, but if you think about it, you get a situation like Enron where people start financing the debt because they're getting commissions. So the banks are getting commissions, and they like the commissions they're getting because it helps with their cash flow, right?
Mm.
So they're closing an eye to what's actually going on underneath the covers at Enron, or the Anderson Claytons, or are doing whatever. Not Anderson Clayton. And Anderson Cooper, we're doing the same thing with the accounting stuff. Usually it's never one thing, it's usually a culmination of things that actually happen that actually precipitate something. And you just never know what is going to finally precipitate the collapse, right? So in the case of, for instance, our company, we had Swiss banks. This is post Mark Rich, when we were partners with Mark Rich, but we had Swiss banks who were financing this. But as you start to see how the cash flow runs, and you have cargoes afloat, or you have insurance concerns, or you have freight concerns, or you have country risk concerns that have all popped up, or you have the Russians defaulting, people panic, and you don't know at what level they're going to panic, and they start pulling back credit.
Mm.
and the banks can pull back their credit at will. We want this collateral now. So I would say that we're in that situation at some point, but we don't know which of the corporations is basically going to get. Is it going to be somebody in the renewable sector? Is it going to be like a Green Plains, which had to declare bankruptcy in the ethanol sector? Is it going to be somebody in the automotive sector? Is Chrysler going to go bust because it's the weak sister probably of all the automobile industries? Is it one of the banks? What was the Japanese? Not the Japanese bank. What was the investment bank in California that was
Oh crap! What was that? Uh, I know what you're talking
bank
about.
or whatever it was, whoever it was. Um, you never know which.
Chat. Tell us what the name of that bank was. They were big into crypto. It's in Silicon Valley Bank.
Okay. Well, anyway, any of these, you presume is going to have some exposure or have a run on it for whatever reasons,
Hmm.
and so everybody seems to think that. Everybody, this is what it is, Mike. Everybody thinks the world is very linear. And they think they get up in the morning, they go to their office, and they come back, and everything is, it goes, and that's just not the way it is.
Hmm.
There's a gazillion things happening that may keep you from getting to your office,
Oh yeah.
and the same is true for work, or for executions on contracts, or for supply chain, as you were talking about, or for manufacturing, or whether they have the raw materials, or whether they can get it, or whether they've got the truck. I mean, we can't even organize. For the longest time, I was working with a group called the Course Logistics, who did. Trying to get oil companies, other companies to organize their freight so they could actually manage their freight internally, because the way they were doing it was insane. We don't standardize purchasing.
Hmm.
Today, we still don't standardize purchasing in any of the major companies. So if I have a project, I have my own purchasing agreement, my own purchasing engineer and all that other stuff, and that's a separate group from what I'm doing over here on some other project. They're not even consolidated. So how do you know who's the most competitive or what's the best or where the efficiencies are? Because everything is individually done. And I
Well,
think what's happened is we've gone from the quote new economy, and people started to realize there is no such thing as a new economy. It's basically a commodity economy,
hmm.
right? You know,
Absolutely.
there was no,
So
there was no, there was no. When I told Jeff Skillings that there was no financial model, no trading model, no business model for the last several thousand years, which said that you could have a trading company without assets. Because every person who has a trading company knows at some point, weather, wars, assassinations, floods, famines, other acts of God, government exchange, supply shift, stupidity, something as ships afloat, shit happens, right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
the bank wants to have collateral.
Hmm.
They're not going to take your baby blue eyes as collateral in most
What?
cases. Well, they won't. They might
So
take yours. They may take yours because they're brown.
they may. So let's shift to my favorite topic, crypto. So the crypto is hailing itself as basically the fix for many pain points. So everything from tokenization of real world assets to smart contracts, automatic execution, basically getting rid of intermediaries, streamlining processes, being able to automate a lot of shipping and just a lot of different things. Where do you see crypto and more not necessarily the tokens, but the technology? Where do you see its role moving forward?
Look, the whole idea for Bitcoin and the ledger, the block ledger is the blockchain ledger is perfectly adequate. But I can tell you, 20 years ago, when we were doing this with a ship uh, called Ship Docs, we couldn't get any shipping company to deal this when we were trying to electronically put together bills of lading. So if you know anything about bills of lading,
Yeah.
cargo has
Hmm.
can have, you have a full bill of lading owned by the captain. He has control over it. There's 3 or 4 copies of it, and the cargoes are discharged basis the ownership upon arrival.
Yeah.
So tracing all this stuff and who's been delivered, et cetera, is really important. It took almost until about 4 years ago for my friend and I Tim finally got a Greek owner to buy it who had connections with the shipping industry and the grain industry, and got the Exxons of the world and the Cargills of the world to start using electronic ledgers for bills of lading. But it
Mm,
took almost 20 years to do it, right?
mm.
And the fact about the cryptocurrencies is there's nothing wrong with the ledger problem. The problem is that there's no intrinsic value. At least with a bill of lading, you have actual cargo and store of value.
Mm.
Cotton, oil, lizard tongues doesn't make any difference, right?
Yeah.
I think you told me there was 2 million different cryptocurrencies out there, and maybe we have
Oh,
10 or
more than that. Yeah, there's like 20
or
million
maybe
or
20
something.
are going to survive whatever happens. But you're in this mania that looks like the tulips in the 17th century, and we don't know what the fallout's going to be and who's going to pull the rug out from it. But there's no question that sort of rarity for Bitcoin has gotten lots of attention. It certainly is the king of the cryptocurrencies, and followed probably by Ethereum and a few others. But is is it going to be the store of value like gold? It's easier to spend than a bar of gold.
Yeah.
I'll give it that, right? It has more transactional ability than that.
Yeah, it's
But
more
I don't
liquid.
know whether $120,000 for Bitcoin or $5,000 for Bitcoin is the right price for transaction. Frankly, I have no idea,
Mm.
because the issue is that because you have a limited amount, you're running up the price. But at some point, is there going to be, to your point, a reset because you've
Mm.
got so many people in the crypto markets?
Mm.
And I have no idea. I mean, a lot of people made a lot of money buying cryptocurrency. I had Bitcoin, got out of it. You know why I got out of it? Because I didn't want to be in chain with people who were arms dealers, sex slaves, all the rest of it that was taking place, because these were basically untraceable. Even though it was in the ledger, there was no legal structure to protect you from being complicit with some transaction that you may not have had anything to do with. And
Yeah,
it's taken
there was
10
no
years. We're still
KYC
five
or AML.
years. We're still 5 years from trying to get legislation cleared up. Now it's gotten more high profile, so they're trying to build in protections around the fact that you're not really, enslaving people or whatever the hell it happens to be, or assassinating people.
Yeah,
But
they're working on
but
KYC.
it was like cash, right? It's, as I said, people paid the same way we used to pay $100,000 in a bag of cash.
Mm.
So that has matured to some degree, but I don't know how long it's going to take for that to happen. Right? You're still
Gotcha.
having the same problems in the cryptocurrencies that you have in the regular currencies. How many people have been stolen? Billions of dollars of cryptos have been ripped off.
Yeah.
So I
No,
don't
absolutely.
see the advantage as such for the crypto per se, and I'm not so sure that the market hasn't gotten ahead of itself to some degree, because Bitcoin for the longest time was like a couple of bucks or 50 cents or some damn cheap amount, and then
Mm.
it started to escalate relatively. You've got the curves. I don't have the curves,
Oh
but
yeah.
it started to capture, and when it started to capture people's attention, it made perfect sense. And I think it does make sense in many ways, both from a transactional point of view, but it takes up so much power to calculate and to it's coming. I wonder if it's coming to a critical juncture where the cost of energy is impacting the actual value of the currency itself in terms of mining.
Gotcha.
Is there an
And
intrinsic value at which point you're stuck, so to speak?
and I definitely would tend to agree when it comes to Bitcoin, and that there does need to be some KYC, AML, guide rails, established, things like that. I know that there's some other projects. We won't go down that road too far, that are actually working on basically bringing the traditional finance markets on chain. Ondo is one that's tokenizing the New York Stock Exchange. You have other companies that are building exchanges that offer commodities, tokenized commodities, and tokenized the QQQ and the VIX, just all these different all these different offerings, that they're tokenizing them to make them more tradable, more liquid.
Let me ask you a question.
Go ahead.
I may. No, because you just said something that has triggered me. I said, so let's talk about carbon for a minute.
Okay.
and carbon credits.
Yeah, green finance, carbon credits.
The green finance. Well, besides the greenwashing piece, we'll just all accept that greenwashing
Okay.
exists. But I could make a case that at some point people wake up and realize that carbon credits are 90% bullshit.
Yeah.
All right. The question I have is if the carbon market completely collapses, does it drag other like uh, entities with it because there's this all of a sudden the bubble has popped? I'm not suggesting that's what happens. We've already lost a lot of value in carbon credits, and there's still a lot of people who are pushing to get cleaning up, mostly in traceability. I mean, frankly, the Nestle's of the world don't give a damn about carbon credits. They want to know that the farmer is doing what he's supposed to be doing, and they know where it came from that field with those practices to that baby's mouth
Yeah.
or your mouth, which is the right thing to do, frankly.
Yeah.
Right? And paying him for it the same amount that a quote carbon credit might be. But I'm wondering if there are other entities out there besides the cryptocurrencies which could trigger the kind of liquidation event that you're talking about, or sort of a series of issues, because we have so much fluff going in so many different areas.
Mm.
Does one trigger the rest? And that's what usually happens. People start to panic and they have cross investments, and all of a sudden they go, holy shit, and they go, I got to get out of this, and they start, and it's all sales, right?
I think that potentially right now, because it's such a new technology, it's like the dot coms. There's the total market cap of crypto right now sits at 3.65 trillion. That's nothing compared to traditional markets. I think that as new as this technology is, it's a lot more volatile, obviously. I think as it matures and as the decentralized finance and traditional finance merge more, that I think it's going to be less impactful if one sector, such as carbon credits, takes a dump. It's not going to take the whole market down with it in some kind of cascade.
You froze, Michael. Michael, you froze.
Stock markets, governments, all of those,
No,
entities.
I agree with you. I'm just saying, I'm just, I lost you.
Sorry about that.
I don't know what happened. Anyway, no, I'm not suggesting
Starlink.
I'm not suggesting that's what it is, but I'm just saying that we have so many of these things because it could be the real estate market, right? I mean, how in the hell are you going to buy a house in Florida or California when you can't get insurance on, how do you get a mortgage?
Yeah.
Right. Or the Gulf Coast.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, there are so many things that are up in the air right this minute. It's really difficult to have confidence about what things are going to go straight sort of to the end game without having lots of complications. And I don't know that it's, I don't know if it's automotive. I don't know if it's real estate. I don't know if it's industry, starts to have issues around exports or local production or consumption. We're not going to get enough truckers. I made a terrible investment in Too Simple because I was coming back from California and I said, holy shit, that truck doesn't have a driver. And I was watching them come from Los Angeles to Phoenix. And I said, I got to go. And so I looked at it and they had this whole program on Too Simple. And I said, that's great. Even if it's just I-10 corridor, east and west, it solves 30,000 trucking jobs that we don't have.
Yeah.
We need 100,000 truckers across the country still, right? But I invested in it and it promptly collapsed. It cost me a fortune. But the point is, I don't know how many of these and which only 1 or 2 or 5 or 10% are going to actually make the cut, right?
Absolutely.
It's true in crypto.
100%.
It's probably the top 5 or 7 or 10 cryptocurrencies, and probably the top 5 do 80% of the business, and the rest of them are just kind of swamping around.
It basically those are the ones that are.
But there is always a contagion when something happens. Is it a stock market sell-off? I have no idea. Is it a tech sell-off? I have no idea. But is it a possible war? Is it an embargo? Is it there is always something that happens, and people always forget that something always happens when everybody is exuberant about stuff. And I think we're still being very, very exuberant given where we are today. And
And
given, by the way, because you are old enough, we have not had a recession since 2008.
then,
My kids don't know what it's like to have to go bust tables. Well, thank God they're all well educated and they're all working in good jobs. But
mm,
still, those jobs, some of those jobs are going to disappear. I mean, I can imagine lots of jobs at Amazon disappearing, right, because of robotics
yep,
and the Googles and all the rest, right? You don't need programmers anymore because of AI.
AI,
Lots of stuff.
yeah,
It's already happening in McKinney, Texas. You were talking to Taylor. He was telling you the issues in McKinney. I think that is happening East Coast, West Coast, right? But
mhm.
it takes some time to go through the system, right?
No, absolutely. No, and I really do feel like that, there really, it feels like there's a lot of these catalysts that are converging that is going to exacerbate what I feel is the bubble that we've been talking about, between commercial real estate and, banks being over leveraged in that, AI, robotics, the national debt,
It could be unemployment. I mean, I don't know what the unemployment. I mean, is there a number at unemployment where people start to get concerned and they actually say, "Hey, we really are in a recession"? I mean,
mhm,
and at that point, because it's official, now everybody pulls back, right?
mhm,
I mean, budgets are already being constrained for approvals in most corporations.
mhm,
You're seeing lots of consolidation in the oil and gas industry, right?
yep,
So, as corporations start to try and figure out how to do this, but they're not very good about creating efficiencies. People forget it took BP Amoco, God, 15 years to become amalgamated, my God, because there were, two behemoths trying to be the same company and they still screwed it up, right? I mean, these things are not just a turn of the knob or a light switch on and off. And
mhm.
everybody's expectations are that things are fixed quickly like a light switch, and that's just not the way it is. It takes systems to get these things to work right.
Well, and I know you have, massive amounts of experience above and beyond mine, but even in, my decade of, doing contract work to come in and deal with operations issues, from startups to, large companies, it's, my experience is that the larger the company, the more difficult it is to fix because it's more deeply ingrained. There's, more red tape and, people you have to go through. You have egos, of people that don't want to see, their baby. You call their baby ugly.
Or you're a competitor, or
Yeah.
you risk embarrassing them. Or when I first got into the emissions trading business, nobody knew me from Adam's house cat. I just got from Switzerland and I happened to fall into it. But since I could talk to the Dow Chemicals and the BASFs and the Lionel Basells and the passenger refinings and all the people, and I knew how their businesses ran, I was able to talk to their HSC people and work myself right up the chain, Kinder Morgan, the whole nine yards, all the big guys. So, but that was because the market was brand new. There were no experts, and I happened to be the only expert and actually read all the bloody regs and knew more than they did.
Yeah.
Today, but before it was just a bucket shop, buyer, seller. Oh, I've got this, but no one actually was using anything to actually help. Today, for me to become an approved vendor for any of these companies, oh my God, they want my firstborn male child.
Yeah.
It to your point, right? Because the rigidity now becomes far, unless you've got a sponsor, it's very, very difficult to get inside the hut.
Mhm.
And it
And
takes a
yeah,
long time to be approved. And it takes a long time to be approved. If you're whether it's a Chevron or an Exxon or Antilli, it's still a long time. So there are people's patience is gone, and people lost the sense of time that it takes to get things done. You know, Unfortunately, the infrastructure around two-dimensional thinking and telephones and computers doesn't tell people what it takes to go to the bathroom. There's a
mhm.
lot of stuff or get laid. I mean, it isn't just turn the switch on, right? There's stuff that's got to get done. You have to prepare a bloody meal. You have to go shopping. You have to know
Yeah.
that the vegetables are either organic or not organic or whatever it is. You have to know what it's in season. But you just don't flip a switch and say, I'm going to do this today and it's in my pantry, which is what people
Yeah.
kind of think things happen today.
No, no, and it's I used to get laughed at for using the term reverse planning, and and I to me it makes perfect sense, but
It
for
does
some
to me
reason,
too.
yeah,
We
it's what
like
is
you, we always start at the destination and work backwards. We never
yeah,
start here and then go forward. If I don't know
yeah,
what the destination looks like, I don't know how to get there because what's there is literally iterated through a chain to where I am.
Well, the path dictates the desired end result. It's
Exactly.
it's like land
Absolutely.
navigation. It's the route that I'm going to take depends on where I'm trying to get, what time I'm trying to get there, and what I'm carrying or whatever. And to me, it just makes logical
It,
sense
it is,
to.
it, but it's perfectly correct. It's perfectly correct, and it's grounded in experience, and it's grounded in history. Because if you tried to do it the other way, you'd be up on the high seas with your ass out there and not knowing what the hell is going to happen.
Exactly. You're not going to have the right equipment to get there successfully. The end result is going to be chaotic. It's going to be it's basically a crapshoot. It's like throwing a dart and hoping that it turns out in a positive way. So, well,
Well, that's in fact because of, and so many people have said, "Well, you're an adventurer," and I said, "Well, that's true. I am an adventurer. I don't usually calculate where I'm going, and I
yeah,
often do it aimlessly, and then I have to go pick up the pieces and go fix it if I'm not paying attention to where I am. So that's all right.
no,
Listen,
exactly.
I didn't. I appreciate you trying to interview me for something that I don't know how useful this has been to your usual audience, but there are I think decent um, books that were written many long years ago about iceberg and black swan, et cetera.
Yeah,
And there are plenty of things that are going on. And as I said, I don't know that anybody has the foresight to know when it's going to happen, but I think you're right. Everybody senses something's going to happen. They just don't know what the timing is and where it's coming from.
absolutely.
And if people have that sensation, it's like the Seven Samurai, the guy who doesn't go through the door. The other guys are all ready and they're prepared, but one guy doesn't go in because he knows somebody's on the other side. You just have to stand back and see what you're going to do and try and protect yourself from that point of view.
Yeah,
And I think that's the only thing you can do because you have family, you have, partners, you have assets, you have work, you have colleagues. You're all in it together, and you don't want to see anybody on the street suffering badly if you can avoid
and
it.
and I have a very simple term for that is be proactive, not reactive. You know,
Exactly.
plan for the worst, and you're always pleasantly surprised.
I
So,
am. And
do you have time for one last question?
sure, go ahead.
All right. So, last question: what keeps you optimistic about the future of?
I lost you, but I can answer it. Look, here, this is the summation of the history of the world. I don't know if you can hear me or not for your
Oh,
broadcasting. Can you hear
oh,
me?
sorry about that. Yeah, it's there we go.
Okay.
It's I'm on
So,
Starlink.
so
So
there,
I
it's all
lose
right.
signal.
I'll be brief. But
All
this
right.
is this is fundamentally the history of the world. We have forgotten far more than we know today.
Mm,
And we have forgotten that the individual, whatever your spiritual background is or religious background, has extraordinary capacities to improvise, adapt, overcome. And we've always said, ingenuity, nature is the mother of ingenuity. We have an ability to take, like the phoenix, come from complete destruction and rebuild in iterations fairly quickly. And if we can find the right like-minded people, we can do that faster.
mm.
If you believe in sort of the issue that we're going to have a setback like we had in 2008, or we're going to have a setback like we've had in the 70s, et cetera, um, we can always find a way. But I think it's more about managing time and expectations. People always think it happens quickly. Real life does not happen quickly.
Mm.
Kids don't get born and they're 21 and in college or out, right? You've got a whole series of things you have to do when you're dealing with, I don't care if they're sheep, dogs, kids, partners, colleagues,
Mm.
life is complicated. But
Mm.
when you can focus on the two or three or four or five things which are really important, you can rank them under Maslow. You know what you need to do to get through the day. You know what you need to do for work. You know how you need to improvise, adapt, and overcome. And you will figure it out because we're just an ingenious species. We're
Mm.
dangerous as hell, stupid as hell. We've got more defects than you can list today in the next 50 years. But by God, we can do strange things out of our ass that other creatures on this planet cannot do.
Mm.
And we've seen it happen, right? Either through inspiration, either through hard,
Or accident.
either through location, either through geography, just pure unadulterated luck,
Mhm.
right? Just because the resources were at our feet or they weren't at our feet and we knew where to go get them.
Mhm.
The history of the world is doing extraordinary things. I'm a traditional archer. People laugh at me when I say that. Well, I say, well, you know what? It's been around for about 25,000 years.
I
It
shoot the bow.
didn't even change until 1970 when they put together a compound bow.
Yeah.
It was pretty damn effective. And if you go and look at any of the old caves in Algeria or in the United
Mhm.
States or some of the Indian tombs, you'll see archers. We're talking 15,000 years ago in caves.
Yeah.
And it's the same bow. The same guy, the Uzi guy who died in Italy in the Alps, is using the same bow that they were using as a longbow in Scotland and England in the
Mhm.
17 and 1800s. We can do really interesting stuff. We just don't think we can because we've had it given to us for often. But if you need to do it, you'll figure it out. So
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
pretty optimistic about our capacity to do extraordinary things with limited resources.
Well, I appreciate your time, sir. It's always a pleasure talking to you, as always. And I definitely wouldn't mind having you on again if you have the time.
Well, you have to find out if your audience cares, but more importantly, it's been years since we've had a chance to go spend some time together.
Mm.
We should do it anyway offline when we can. It's always a pleasure, and I hope I didn't embarrass you. And there you go.
Not at all, sir. It's you're always very interesting gentleman to listen to, and maybe if we're able to have you on again, then we can talk about some of your more comical experiences.
Plenty of those. God knows I've shot myself in the foot and above more times than those. God bless.
God
Godspeed.
bless.
Take care of yourself, and we'll be talking soon. Okay.
All right, take care,
Best
sir.
to your audience wherever they are.
All right, till next time, Veteran
Okay.
Crypto out.
Bye. If I can